Women in Britain are being forced to turn to sex in exchange for basic necessities due to the cost of living crisis. Charities such as Beyond the Streets are seeing more women in vulnerable situations turning to survival sex as a way to pay rent or meet their other needs. Increasing economic hardships are leading to a growing problem of sex for rent, in which landlords use it as a tool to abuse and exploit those seeking housing. Women's Aid has reported that those contacting them are in dire need and are suffering the consequences of rising living costs, trapping them in abusive relationships. Latin American Women's Aid, LAWA, is also seeing multiple cases of sex for rent in recent months, with instances of harassment and abuse in public law accommodation facilities. Women in these vulnerable positions fear going to these services, leaving them open for exploitation by abusers living in private accommodations. Government funding for charity services is insufficient under the current economic climate. This lack of support leaves many with no option to turn to survival sex, exacerbating their exploitation and abuse. Women's Aid is calling for increased financial support for victims to have the opportunity to leave their abusive relationships. Generation Rent adds warnings about the growing risks in this bleak economic climate. The Home Secretary has recently taken a spur to target landlords exploiting vulnerable people through sex by launching a new call for evidence. While this is a first step to help stop this deeply harmful trend and provide protection, charities are calling for more financial aid in order to address the roots of the problem: homelessness, poverty, and inequality. The government's Tackling Domestic Abuse plan will provide an over £230 million investment to help support victims of abuse. It is essential that the voices of vulnerable women are heard, and it is vital that the government takes immediate steps to support those affected by the cost of living crisis and abusive relationships. More resources need to be provided to safety nets, as well as adequate support for shelters and